Hello, everyone. This is Sean from the Soccer Nostalgia blog. I have the pleasure to interview Scottish author Mr. Matt Corr. Mr. Corr is the author of Celtic Glasgow related books such as Invincible, Harry Hood, Twice as Good, and co author of Walfrid and the Bhoys, Celtic's founding fathers' first season and early stars. This is an interview that's separate from the podcast series. This video interview will serve as a companion piece to a written blog presentation on the Rapid Vienna versus Celtic Glasgow Cup Winners' Cup matches in the fall of 1984. Hello, Mr. Corr. Thank you for this interview and welcome.
Hi, good evening, Sean. Welcome.
Thank you. So, can you introduce yourself and your trajectory into football?
Yeah, sure. I guess like lifelong Celtic supporter, man and boy. And since I sort of retired from my work career, I've been involved. I do have a tour guide, stadium tour guide at Celtic, and I basically, I guess I write about Celtic, I write books, stories for blogs and that kind of thing, an occasional podcast. So I guess Celtic's pretty much my life at the moment.
Yes. So let's get to this match in 1984.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, what was the state of the affairs with Celtic in this fall of 1984?
Okay, so I guess 1984 was a bit strange year for me. I remember it was, I guess, my early 20s. If you can rewind 12 months back in the season that ended in the summer of '83, it was a tremendous season in Scotland. You had three fantastic sides: Celtic, Aberdeen, Dundee United. Not just in Scotland. Aberdeen that year would beat Bayern Munich and Real Madrid to win the Cup Winners' Cup, and Dundee United were a top quality side. Celtic at that time as well, some fabulous players. So the reason I mention that is at the end of that season, Celtic lost the league in the dying seconds of the season, despite I say having some wonderful attacking players in particular. And we then lost Charlie Nicholas, who had scored 50 plus goals that season, just sensational talent. Charlie decided to head down to Arsenal for big money. And also, I guess maybe more poignantly, we lost Billy McNeill, the manager. Well, whatever happened between Billy and the board, Billy also headed down south. So 1984 was, I remember it being quite a tough year to be Celtic with a new manager, with new players coming in, and it was, we're struggling to gel a wee bit. But then towards the autumn, it started to pick up a wee bit, and particularly just around the time of this game, I got the feeling that maybe things were about to turn around. Brian McClare, who was actually Billy McNeill's last signing as a Celtic manager, Brian McClare came, from nowhere. He was scoring goals for fun. Still had Danny McGrain, David Provan, Paul McStay, with some wonderful players. Frank McGarvey, God rest him, with some wonderful players in the team. And we thought maybe, just maybe, we might go on a wee run this year. So I guess that's the sort of state of play, coming in the back of a tremendous side and basically rebuilding and under a new manager with several new players.
Yes. And we should remind everyone that around this time, Aberdeen is dominating the league with Sir Alex Ferguson as manager. In 1984, there were double winners. And in fact, they defeated Celtic in the final of the Scottish Cup. So that's why Celtic gained entry into the Cup Winners' Cup.
Yeah.
And as far as transfers, also Alan McNally came in from Ayr United. And more importantly, Mo Johnson arrived from Watford, but it was in October, so he was ineligible for these matches against Rapid. And you mentioned some of the players. Others we can mention is Packy Bonner in goal, the Republic of Ireland goalkeeper, uh, Aitken, Proven, Peter Grant, Murdo McLeod, Tommy Burns. You mentioned McLaren, McGarvey. So a decent side managed by David Hay at the time.
That's correct.
So one of the other players, Paul McStay, was one of the emerging stars of his team. Can you describe his impact at this point?
Yeah, Paul McStay was a tremendous player. We tell about Paul McStay from when he was playing as a schoolboy. There's only really one schoolboy game that gets televised back in Scotland, and it's the international between England and Scotland at Wembley. So this Paul would only be maybe 15 years old. and he basically lit the place up in that showpiece game. So we were all eagerly waiting for Paul coming through. I think he made his debut. It was actually at his debut against Queen of the South. He'd only be 17, and Paul McStay slipped immediately into the team and basically never left until, sadly, injury curtailed his career. By 1984, then Paul would be 20, but he'd already been playing in the team for 2 or 3 seasons, and at that time he was also now a regular in Scotland. I seen around the same time. I remember scoring a fantastic goal. I think it was against Iceland. Scored a fantastic goal at Hampden. So Paul McStay was probably at the, if not at the peak of his talent, certainly the beginning of that 4 or 5 year period where there weren't many better players, midfield players than Paul, and it's never mind in Scotland and the whole of the UK. Tremendous player.
Yes. So at this point, what do you know about Rapid Vienna at this time? I assume the familiar names would have been Hans Krankel and Antonin Panenka, and that was more or less it.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I remember Panenka for obviously for the penalty back when when Czechoslovakia won in Belgrade, I think it was. But Rapid Vienna, to me, probably at that time, the only one I would really known would have been Krankel, because Krankel in the World Cup of 82, World Cup of 82 in Spain, Krankel sort of made his name there. I think he might have got a transfer to Barcelona at one time. So probably Hans Krankel. Hans Krankel certainly was the one that was well known. I don't think Panenka played. He certainly didn't play at Parkhead. I don't know if he played in the first leg. But
yeah, he played in the first match, but then he was injured after that. Yeah.
Injured after that. So I couldn't have told you Panenka was there, but certainly, yeah, I'd heard of him. But Krankel was the main danger. I mean, all the media attention was focused, in terms of the Austrians, was focused around Krankel. I couldn't have named any other players.
Yes. So Celtic had passed the first hurdle in this Cup Winners' Cup. So this was the second round of the matches. So the first leg, let's look at the first match. The first leg was at Vienna on October 24th. Now, let's look through the Rapid Vienna lineup. We have Herbert Führer, Leo Lehner, Karl Brunner, Johann Pregesbauer, Heribert Weber, Reinhard Kinas. He replaced by Kurt Gardner in the 65th minute, Zlatko Kranjčar, Antonin Panenka, Hansi Krankel, Peter Brucic, and Peter Pakolt. And the side is managed by Otto Baric. For Celtic, we have the following lineup: Packy Bonner, Danny McRae, Mark Reed, Roy Aitken, Willie McStay, Peter Grant, Davy Provan, Paul McStay, Brian McClare, Murdo McLeod, and Frank McGarvey, who would be replaced in the 35th minute by Alan McInally. Yeah. Now, this match, Rapid would win 3-1. And Celtic actually were wearing an uncharacteristic yellow kit for this match. And I don't think they didn't wear that many more times after this, I don't think. That was one of those...
That's spot on, Shahan. My abiding memory of the first game was Celtic wearing this yellow kit. I don't think they ever wore it, certainly not competitively anyway. Right. It was a unique kit, and I guess Rapid playing in green and white.
Exactly.
Both home and away kits with a clash. But yeah, that was one. And we'd started going to the European away games a season or two before that. So we'd been in places like Turin, and I remember being in Rotterdam. And we were actually, at the previous round was Ghent of Belgium. And we ran a bus. So 50 of us from our part of the world went to that first leg, and then it was an old stadium. I think we lost a goal late on. We certainly lost 1-0, but because we'd been to Belgium, we couldn't then go to Vienna. So I remember listening. I think I listened to that game at home in the radio, and Celtic were actually doing quite well. There was a bit of niggle in the game. Surprise, as things would, as things would pan out. But Celtic were holding on from memory. McInally, I think, made his debut. Ryan McClare scored. And Celtic were holding on, doing quite well at 2-1. And then we lost a late goal, possibly Krankel. But at that time, Celtic, a strange European team, we had some fantastic performances at home in Glasgow with some really great attacking players. And it was pretty much a fortress at that time. Celtic rarely lost at home. But conversely, we struggled to win away in Europe, with the exception of maybe the win over Ajax, maybe 2 years before that. 2 years before that, we really struggled to win. So 2-1, coming back from Austria, 2-1 down, knowing because away 2-1 down, knowing a 1-0 would have taken you through, would have been a great result for Celtic. But we lost a third goal right in the end, and that sort of that sort of made it a more difficult challenge. So there was a sort of 50-50 feel coming into the second leg, whether we'd do it or not.
Yeah. So as far as this match, Rapid would take the lead in the second half in the 53rd minute when Peter Parkhead scored
Yeah.
after a long solo run on the right side
Yeah.
and scored from a narrow angle. Celtic tied the match just a few minutes later in the 56th minute through McClare. And McInally, who'd come on in the first half, set him up with that. And in the 66th minute, Panenka took a free kick on the right side, and that was headed in by Lehner. And like you said, just before the end, Krankel scored the third. So now you kind of mentioned that it was kind of Celtic always knew they could do well at home, but there was some. It was said that there was some ill will already because of Kinas's foul that had injured McGarvey and forced his substitution. Is that how the Celtic faithful felt about the match?
Well, I think that's certainly true. I mean, no one could have foretold what was about to happen, but certainly was a niggle. In fact, McInally gets sent off that night. Can't remember exactly why. McInally gets sent off, maybe for retaliation or whatever. But that's right. Frank McGarvey was taken off in the first half, substituted. Danny McGrain got a booking that put him out of the second game.
Yes,
so
yes.
When I was looking at the team, you may be going to talk about that. I mean, looking at the team for the second leg, Celtic were actually weakened in 2 or 3 places. But yeah, there was a feeling that as I say, I don't have a great memory of that particular night, other than the kit and the late goal, if I'm being honest. But there was a bit of niggle. Certainly, there was a bit of niggle getting into the second leg.
Yes. So the second leg at Parkhead on November 7th. You mentioned McInally was suspended because he was sent off, and McGrain was suspended because he was already booked against Ghent in the first round and booked again against Rapid in this first leg. So for this second match at Parkhead, McGrain is out, McInally is out. Mark Reed is also left out of the team, and in their place, Tom McAdam and Tommy Burns come into the squad. Rapid also make a couple of changes. Their starting goalkeeper Herbert Fury is out, as well as Panenka, and in their place, Carl Ehen in goal and Kurt Garger start in their place. So for this match, we have the following lineup for Celtic: Bonner, Willie McStay, McLeod, Aitken, Tom McAdam, Grant, Proven, McStay, McClare, Tommy Burns. He replaced by Mark Reed in 95th minute and Frank McGarvey. For Rapid, we have Carl Ehn, Leo Lehner, Garger, Pregesbauer, Weber, Kinast, Kranjkar, Carl Branader. He replaced by Gerald Vilfurth in the 50th minute, Krankel, Brucic, Pakult, and he replaced by Rudolf Weinhofer in the 69th minute. So Celtic did all the attacking, and they were rewarded in the 33rd minute when McClare struck Proven's cross on the right side.
Yeah.
Celtic would score the second goal just before the halftime when Murdo McLeod volleyed, and after a series of deflections. And at this point, Celtic were already qualified because of the away goals rule, but they continued attacking in the second half. Now, it was in the second half where all the troubles would start. And it's really with the third goal. So in the 68th minute, Celtic would score the third goal, which, according to a Rapid team, it should have been disallowed. So what happened is McGarvey sent a cross from the left side for Burns. The Rapid goalkeeper, Carl N., he handled the ball, but Burns slid in with the speed and just knocked it out of his hands and scored the third goal. So naturally, the Rapid players protested and felt some injustice, as they felt Ehan had already handled the ball and the play should have stopped. So this anger would lead to the unrest at the end of the match.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. There was one or two things went on in the first half as well, but you're right. The incident sort of kicked off the problems that night was the goal. So Tommy's got in. You're right. Tommy's got in 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper. I think your viewpoint where the goal was illegal would probably depend on your affiliation to whatever club. Certainly, if you're Rapid, you'd have felt that maybe Tommy was going in with a foot raised, and maybe nowadays that goal would not have been allowed. I'm not convinced the goalkeeper had it at any time. I think the goalkeeper seen Tommy coming and sort of flinched for the challenge. Anyway, the ball broke loose and Tommy put it in, and as you say, all hell broke loose. Rapid players protesting the referee, but the upshot was that the goal stood. Celtic, as you said, were already through it 2-0, but certainly getting that third goal put us in a really strong position.
Yes. And a few minutes later, Rapid Vienna's Reinhard Kinas.
Yes.
He was in the box with Tommy Burns right in front of it.
Yes.
With the referee, I guess, away from the action, looking the other way. So he just swung a punch at the back of Tommy Burns, either his neck or back of his head. Yeah. And the linesman saw that. Correct. And yes, and there was a feeling that he was exacting revenge for what had happened to Ed. So the referee basically sent off Kinas, but strangely he did not award a penalty kick. That's something that I'm sure today with VAR and everything he would have immediately pointed to the spot as well. But for some strange reason he sent off Kinas but did not award a penalty kick. And
Shan, sorry, I've never really thought about that before. That's spot on. The incident, I can play the incident quite clearly in my head. It's quite.
He was in the box. Yeah, he was in the box.
Absolutely, he's in the box. I think we're waiting on a throw in the main stand side. I'm behind the goal. We're waiting for the main side, and the road goes up. But when you see it on TV later, he actually comes up behind Burns, who's, and my recollection is that, as you say, he throws a punch at the back of his head. Tommy, God rest him, hits the turf, and it's the linesman. The referee doesn't see it's the linesman, so you're spot on. If the referee is sending the player off, it absolutely should have been a penalty kick. I've never really thought about that before. Yeah. Should have been a penalty kicks, definitely.
Later, and himself, he also exacts revenge on Burns and kicks him in the box.
Yes.
Now, this time a penalty kick was awarded.
Yes.
And again, this led to protests from the Rapid players, and because of the situation with the third goal and the sending off, and now this penalty kick. So it was at this point that Krankel and Baric persuaded the team to walk off in protest. But the UEFA observers that were there persuaded them to stay. And again, this is the point where there's such protest that as much as 15 minutes, it took as much as 15 minutes for order to be restored and the play to resume. And after all of that, Peter Grant missed a penalty kick.
So. I mean, there's so many. You're right. It's bringing back so many memories. There's so many things to talk about here. But the first one's got to be the challenge itself, because while the punch by the defender is away from the view of the referee, the goalkeeper's challenge was absolutely blatant. You picture the scenario: you've got a player running through and a goalkeeper coming out. He collects the ball. Tommy Burns is nowhere near him. He collects the ball and then he lashes out with his foot. Maybe, to the right. It's the most blatant penalty kick you will ever see. And why the goalkeeper wasn't sent off is another mystery, because that is absolutely violent play. But this time, as you're gathering, the Austrians had lost. They'd lost the plot. The sense of grievance or whatever. They'd lost the plot. So, but again, it's the linesman that flags. I don't know why the referee's not giving the penalty, but certainly the linesman flags. And this time the penalty is awarded. As you say, it's 10 minutes easy, 15 minutes before Grant takes a penalty. Then, surprise, he takes a penalty after that length of time, and as often happens, he puts it past the post. But it was an incredible season. It was an incredible night. But it was an incredible series of events, that particular passage of play. Crazy.
And it still was not over yet. So the most dramatic event was about to come, involving Rudolf Weinhofer of Rapid. So around the 80th minute, bottles and or objects are being thrown by Celtic supporters on the field. Now, one of these objects struck Weinhofer's head, and he was stretchered off at this point, leaving Rapid with 9 men on the field. So the match ends and Celtic have seemingly qualified. But this is just the beginning of the drama that is about to unfold. So let me ask you this, as far as Celtic fans there that day, was there a feeling to this day that Weinhofer was play acting?
I have to take you back there, just in the interest of accuracy. The incident happened at the time of the penalty. My memory, the incident happened at the time of the penalty kick. Fully sure it did. The players went to the linesman to protest about the sending off. Now, there's certainly the TV evidence would show there's a bottle comes onto the park, but it comes onto the park and bounces in the park, and two players go and lift it. It doesn't. The bottle, you never condone anything being thrown at a stadium. So let's make that clear. But to say that the player was hit with the bottle, that's actually inaccurate. The bottle lands in the turf, and there's a Celtic player, I think David Proven, and a Rapid player go to try and get the bottle. I think the Rapid player won that particular battle. And there's maybe, I don't know, a minute or so afterwards, when the player's standing and it's still in the camera view, the player standing goes down holding his head with no object, no clear object thrown. You know, could it have been a coin? I don't know. But the player goes down totally separate from the bottle. And then within a few minutes, he appears like his head bandaged like a war injury. And he's stretched, he's stretchered off the park. I sort of recall him walking off the park, but the whole thing was very distasteful. But the player who went off the park was not hit with a bottle. That is not the case.
So let's discuss the two appeals by Rapid that would lead to the replay in December. From a Celtic perspective, can you describe your own emotions appeal after appeal?
Yeah, well, that's again, it's a long time ago. In my head there was two judgments, but that may be wrong. So what happened initially, from memory, was that obviously as a UEFA observer there, Rapid would have appealed about the scenario, the series of events that happened that night. And my recollection is that both clubs get fined, but Rapid get fined more. And for a Celtic supporter, obviously I'm biased. For a Celtic supporter, that felt right. Celtic get fined, I believe, because objects were thrown onto the pitch. And I think Rapid were fined for the behaviour of their players throughout the night, including, as you said earlier, Shan, the threat to leave the pitch. So that may not be 100% accurate, but that's my recollection. At that time, we thought, well, it was a horrible night. Celtic are through, no more about it. Conversely, then, whatever time lapsed, there's then the in my opinion, a crazy decision. Whatever lobbying was going on in the background, UEFA then done a complete about turn. Can't remember what happened to the fines, but they then ordered the second leg to be replayed, I think 100 miles from Glasgow, because from memory, I thought the two obvious venues would be Pittodrie at Aberdeen, which is over 100 miles away, but still in Scotland, or Old Trafford. And as it turns out, they went to Old Trafford. And I guess that's where the whole sorry saga took another twist. So I can't believe to this day why UEFA overturned the original verdict. There was no logic, there was no evidence to suggest that game should have been replayed. It's sort of without precedent. That's my view, and it still is.
Yes. So let's take a closer look at the appeals. On the first appeal, Rapid claim that Weinhofer was struck by a bottle, a missile, or something from the stands. It also turned out, like you said, Rapid had sent a protest before they even arrived back from Vienna.
Okay.
And this first appeal, uh, like you said, Celtic were fined £4,000 for the balls thrown, and Rapid were fined like £5,000 for Kinas's behavior and other, like you said, the continuous protests and so forth.
Okay.
Now, television highlights apparently had shown that Weinhofer had not been hit by a bottle. And an ambulance driver also apparently submitted reports saying that he saw no sign of bleeding or bruising or
That's right. I forgot
anything like that. And so that was the first appeal. So Rapid immediately appealed again. Again, because of what had happened to Weinhofer. For the second appeal, the UEFA committee, they confirmed Rapid's version of events, that Weinhofer had not been hit by a bottle, but by missile or coins, and had to leave the field because of head trauma. And apparently the Austrians had changed their account from bottle to objects or coins. And so this result was expunged and, as you said, ordered to be replayed 150 kilometers from Glasgow. And Celtic this time were fined for the balls thrown, and Rapid's fine was actually also doubled this time. But yeah, so Celtic director Chris White had said that this decision was ridiculous. His father, the Celtic president Desmond White, who traveled to Zurich in defense of the club, basically said that a simple bottle could destroy a club, and this should serve as a warning to fans. Most Scottish observers believed that they had been cheated by UEFA. And like you said, many in Scotland still believe that Weinhofer was play acting. And there were reports that Rapid had refused to allow a local doctor to examine him and only allowed their own doctor to attend to him. At this point, the Scottish press blamed the Austrian press for reporting that missiles of bottles had been thrown, whereas in the end, I think there were only 2 bottles were thrown. And Pat Craren, the former Celtic star, even advocated that all British clubs should withdraw from the European competitions in solidarity with Celtic. The Celtic officials also complained that the UEFA committee refused to view any television evidence and complained that Rapid had been allowed to change their testimony as much as 3 times in presenting, whether it was, again, bottles or coins or objects. So there was bad blood brewing ahead of this third match, which was served as a replay on December 12th at Manchester at Old Trafford.
The fact that they changed the testimony, Rapid changed the testimony, obviously, it leads you to suspect that all wasn't well. My reason for saying that is if he had been hit, well, he wasn't hit by a bottle, I think that's been established. If he had been hit by a coin and he'd suffered an injury to the extent that was suggested, surely the easiest way to prove that would have been to show the injury. If that happened to me, then the way to convince people is literally to show them the injury, show somebody and get some evidence. So you're right. The only person that will know if he was hit or wasn't hit, I guess, is the player himself. So we'll never know for certain. But certainly the suspicion was that the story was fabricated. Moving back to Old Trafford, you're right. I was there that night, and I'll never forget it. I've never been to a game, and I hadn't been to a game before, and certainly haven't been to a game since where the atmosphere was so poisonous. It was quite incredible. It was as you say, a December night. It was a freezing cold night. I remember it being foggy in Manchester, and there was incredible support. Celtic must have had, there was over 50,000 at the game. Celtic must have had 50,000 supporters in Manchester. I don't think there'd ever been a mobilisation for support before that. but the atmosphere was poisonous. We were in the stand, which would be opposite the TV cameras now, so looking onto a tunnel. And I guess just to put another wee angle in, Manchester United were actually playing that night. They were playing Dundee United in Scotland, and it would be in the UEFA Cup. They'd already played at Manchester and drew there. So they had a wee section of support up in one corner who were basically following their game on the scoreboard. But as I say, the atmosphere was poisonous. And it wasn't Danny McGrain that missed it. It was Roy Aitken. I remember we were in the corner nearest to Stretford end, as I say, facing the tunnel. So the Roy Aitken's shot was at the far side, and if Roy's shot goes in and Celtic are 1-up, I don't think there's any question Celtic would have won that night. You'll never know, but I don't think there's any doubt. But you're right, Parkhead, who I hadn't heard it before, but was a lightning fast player. And I seem to remember there was pretty much no defenders. Right. Maybe summarised Celtic quite well at that time. We had fabulous players going forward, but other than Danny, we sometimes struggled. We struggled to match that at the back, sometimes without being disrespectful. But I remember Packett going round the goalkeeper, and when the ball went in the net, I did think myself, that's a finish, because obviously it's 4-1. You now need 3 goals just to level it, and it just never felt like it was going to happen. I don't remember much about the game after that, I have to say, and I was sober, but I don't remember much about the game after that. I think when that goal went in, our hearts were broken, and I think the whole saga, which had started probably back, I don't know, October, this had been dragging on for weeks. It was all you were reading about, in the matter of what version Celtic, we don't want to be involved in that, it's not a nice scenario. But when the goal went in, the tie was finished. And it actually cost us, maybe come on to that, but it didn't just cost us that year. It actually cost us big style the following season in Europe as well. But I'm maybe jumping ahead. You're maybe going to cover that.
Yeah. So for this match on December 12th at Manchester at Old Trafford, Celtic only made one change from the previous match. Danny McGrain was back in the side in place of Willie McStay. And Rapid, Herbert Fuhr was back in goal instead of N, and they were also missing, a number of other players through injury and suspension: Kinas, Pregesbauer, Krankeland, Panenka. So a number of players came in to deputize, like Weinhofer, Wilfurt, and Johann Gross. So you mentioned the incident with 8 struck the bar, and basically in the ensuing action, Parkhead was just sent through and dribbled Bonner and scored a winner. And yes, I mean, Celtic were demoralized at this point, and the match ended. But again, there was still more controversy on the way. There were more disturbances and disorder in this match, and bottles were thrown, and 2 Rapid players were attacked. So in the 63rd minute, the Rapid goalkeeper, Herbert Fuhr, was attacked by a fan before police intervened and took the fan away. Later, the goal scorer, Peter Parkhead, was kicked in the groin by another fan. The former Celtic manager, Billy McNeil, was in the audience, and he was dismayed at all the crowd trouble, and he predicted worse things to come if this continued, and he would be proven right at the end of that season. But that's another story. Let's look at the aftermath from a Celtic perspective. There is on one hand, from a Celtic perspective, there's the perceived injustice related to the replay. But on the other hand, there is the attacks by the fans on the Rapid players. So how do you look at it? Who was more to blame? Was it UEFA organizers or, the teams?
Yeah. I think there's a number, for me, there's a number of guilty parties. How do I look back at it? I look back at a lot of sadness, a lot of bitterness. So in terms of, I guess, taking it in order, the game should never been the game in Manchester, in my view, should never have been played. I thought the first decision where they basically fined both clubs for the misdemeanours, that should have been the end of it. So having said that, once the game went on at Manchester, you can never defend a supporter attacking a player, never. So I won't do that. I think that a lot of sadness, disappointed. We're out of Europe, and also the big thing for us wasn't just about getting out of Europe, but Celtic's reputation. We built a reputation over many years, for being a sporting support. We follow the team. We give everything to support the team, and we tend to self-police. And these kind of things are, in my view, they're not commensurate with following Celtic. That behaviour does not represent my views and what is acceptable and across the line. So you're right. There was whatever 50,000 Celtic fans in Old Trafford that night, and you have two individuals who take it on themselves to act the way they did, and suddenly Celtic as a club are punished, and Celtic as a support reputation is tarnished. So I look back with a lot of sadness. I think probably overriding emotion. Not just about losing the football match, but in the events that transpired at the end. So I think that's how I'd sum it up, Shan.
In the World Soccer magazine of the time, there was plenty of criticism for UEFA's handling of the situation.
Yeah.
The multiple appeals, the going back and forth, that didn't really look good on them. So in closing, after all these decades, how is this matchup with Rapier regarded by Celtic historians? Is it even remembered? Is it mostly remembered by Celtic historians, or do all Celtic fans, young and old, know about this match?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think it's a certain one. Certainly, I was a young Celtic fan. Now I'm a much older one. I'll never forget it. You've brought back memories. It's nearly 40 years. You've brought back memories, some of which I'd forgotten. You've actually told me a couple of things as well I wasn't aware of tonight. So I'll certainly remember it. But yeah, it's a story that's passed down. There's probably been, there's, I guess, in 5 decades and more watching Celtic, there are maybe three names that stand out, or 3 matches or ties that stand out. There was Racing Club of Argentina when Celtic played in '67. Certainly, I was watching Celtic then, but I've no real recollection of the events. I certainly wasn't at the game at Hampden. So Racing Club, and then a game I was at it, which would be in 1974 when Celtic played Atletico Madrid in the semi-final European Cup. And the first game at Glasgow was scandalous. You'll probably know the story. So probably in my lifetime supporting Celtic, these are the 3 real low points of that nature. 3 games that you would describe as infamous, I guess. We've had many memorable nights at Celtic Park, wonderful nights at Celtic Park. We've had disappointments, we've had defeats, but these three probably stand out. So yeah, I think most folk who as they grow up learning about Celtic, they would certainly be aware of what, even if they weren't alive at the time, they would certainly be aware of the events of 1984. And I suspect it'll be a long time, if ever, before they sort of fade from view.
Right.
That's how big a deal it was, if that makes sense. It also cost us the following year, because what happened is that Celtic were given a 1-match home ban. I think it's a 1-match home ban for the next season, which again we qualified for the Cup Winners' Cup, this time by winning it. We beat Dundee United in the final, and in the first round we drew, guess who? Atletico Madrid, of all the teams to draw, and this is only 10 years after as I say, the infamous European Cup semi-final. We drew Atletico Madrid. We played the first leg in Spain, and we got a really creditable 1-1 draw there. There was no Celtic fans allowed to travel because of the game a decade earlier. So again, we had to watch the highlights on the TV. We drew 1-1, which was a tremendous result for Celtic away from home. And normally coming back to Celtic Park with that kind of result, we had a full house at Celtic Park. You'd been pretty much unbeatable. But I remember they played the game on a Wednesday afternoon. I was working and getting updates on the phone. They played the game in the afternoon and Celtic lost. We rarely, if ever, lost at home back then, but we lost that game. There was nobody in the Celtic Park. Atletico just twisted the knife. So I would argue that UEFA's decision, their second decision, actually cost Celtic dearly. The other thing to me is the European Cup. I've always felt the Cup Winners' Cup was probably the easiest one of the lot to win, because just by its very nature, you get teams who qualify, who haven't won the cup. They get teams that wouldn't normally. I think the Dutch representatives, I'll never forget it. The Dutch representatives a team called Fortuna Sittard, who never appeared anywhere. Everton, there were some tremendous sides that Everton were still in it, and Bayern Munich were still in it. So there was a couple of tremendous sides, but I felt if Celtic could get past Rapid Vienna into the last eight with any sort of luck in the draw, Celtic could have went all the way. As it turned out, Rapid Vienna did go all the way. It just, as I say, you couldn't. Football is just incredible sometimes in the twists and turns. But the final, I remember watching the final at Rotterdam. It was a great Everton side. They were top draw. The final was in Rotterdam. We'd been there a couple of years earlier, and I remember the banner saying Celtic should have been here. I'll never forget that. I think if Everton fans had a banner saying Celtic should have been here. So can you imagine Celtic playing Everton in a European final in the Netherlands? That would just have been incredible. So yeah, I've got a lot of reason to feel a lot of sadness for that time myself and all the Celtic support. So such is life.
Yes. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you for this interview. And I would like to remind everyone to please read the main blog article as well for more detail. The link is included on the video upload description, along with our respective contact information and the link to Mr. Corr's books. So thank you again. I appreciate your time for this interview.
That was my pleasure. Lovely to talk to you, Sean.
Thank you.
Take care.